When I turned 60, I thought the biggest changes in my life were already behind me. My children were grown. My career was winding down. The busy years of raising a family, paying bills, and taking care of everyone else had finally slowed. I believed retirement would simply be a quieter version of the life I had always known. But I was wrong. What surprised me wasn't what I gained after 60, it was what I needed to let go of. For years, I carried habits, fears, and beliefs that no longer belonged in this stage of life. Some of them had followed me for decades, others seemed harmless on the surface. But little by little, they were stealing my peace, my freedom, and my ability to fully enjoy the years I had worked so hard to reach. Then something changed. I began letting go. Not all at once, not perfectly, one small step at a time. And the more I released, the lighter I felt. The less I worried, the more I lived. The less I tried to control everything, the more joy seemed to find its way back to me. Today, I want to share the 9 things I stopped doing after 60 and how those changes transformed my life in ways I never expected. If you're over 60 or approaching it, I hope these lessons encourage you to look at your own life with fresh eyes. And before we begin, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell me your age and where you're watching from. And if you're ready to embrace a happier, healthier chapter of life, be sure to subscribe and join our community. Now, let's begin with the first thing I finally let go of. 1. I stopped saving out of fear. For most of my life, saving money felt like the responsible thing to do. I grew up believing that you should always prepare for the worst. Save for emergencies, save for retirement, save for unexpected problems. And for many years, that mindset served me well. But sometime after I turned 60, I realized something surprising. I wasn't saving for security anymore. I was saving because I was afraid. Afraid of running out, afraid of making a mistake, afraid that something terrible might happen tomorrow. The strange thing was that my basic needs were already covered. I had a comfortable home, enough income to pay my bills, and a modest amount of savings. Yet every time I considered taking a trip, buying something I truly wanted, or treating myself to a special experience, I felt guilty. One afternoon, I looked at an old photo album filled with pictures from family vacations. I noticed something important. None of my favorite memories involved money sitting in a bank account. They were moments spent with people I loved, places I explored, and experiences that made me feel alive. That realization changed me. I didn't become reckless. I didn't suddenly spend without thinking. Instead, I gave myself permission to enjoy some of the life I had worked so hard to build. I took a weekend trip I had been postponing for years. I started saying yes to lunch with friends. I spent money on experiences instead of worrying about every dollar. And you know what happened? Nothing terrible. In fact, life became richer. After 60, I learned that money is meant to support your life, not become a cage built from fear. Sometimes, the greatest investment you can make is in the memories you still have time to create. 2. I stopped spending on things that didn't matter. Once I stopped saving out of fear, I faced another uncomfortable truth. For years, I had been spending money on things that didn't truly make my life better. Some purchases were made out of habit, others were made because I thought I should have them, and some were simply attempts to fill a space inside me that no object could ever fill. I remember opening a closet one day and finding clothes I had forgotten I owned. Some still had the tags attached. I found kitchen gadgets I had used once, decorative items collecting dust, and boxes filled with things I thought would make me happier when I bought them. But they didn't. What brought me joy wasn't any of those things. It was the weekend I spent visiting an old friend I hadn't seen in years. It was the afternoon I took my granddaughter out for ice cream and listened to her talk about her dreams. It was sitting on my porch with a cup of tea while watching the sunset paint the sky. Those moments stayed with me. The purchases didn't. That realization changed the way I looked at money. Instead of asking, "Can I afford this?" I started asking, "Will this add something meaningful to my life?" Sometimes the answer was yes. A comfortable chair that eased my back pain, a plane ticket to visit family, a class that allowed me to learn something new. But many times, the answer was no. And when it was no, I let it go. After 60, I learned that happiness rarely comes from owning more. It comes from appreciating more, from spending with intention instead of impulse, from choosing experiences, relationships, and memories over clutter and obligation. The less I spent on things that didn't matter, the more room I had for the things that truly did. And surprisingly, that made me feel wealthier than ever before. 3. I stopped trading time for money. One of the hardest lessons I learned after 60 was that time had become more valuable than money. For most of my life, I measured success by productivity. If I was busy, I felt useful. If I was working, I felt responsible. Even after retirement, I found myself saying yes to things I didn't really want to do simply because I was used to staying occupied. I filled my calendar with obligations, favors, and commitments. Some of them were worthwhile, many of them were not. Then one morning, I asked myself a simple question. If my time is limited, is this really how I want to spend it? The answer surprised me. I realized I was giving away precious hours without thinking about their value. Hours that could have been spent with family, walking in nature, reading a good book, or simply enjoying a peaceful afternoon. So, I started making different choices. I stopped saying yes to everything. I stopped feeling guilty when I needed rest. I stopped treating every empty space in my schedule as something that needed to be filled. Instead, I began protecting my time. The result wasn't laziness, it was freedom. I discovered that some of the most meaningful moments in life happen when nothing special is planned. A conversation with a friend, a quiet morning with a cup of coffee, watching the sun rise without rushing to the next task. After 60, I finally understood something I wish I had learned much earlier. You can always earn more money. You can buy more things. But you can never buy another hour of your life. And once I stopped trading my time so carelessly, everything began to feel more valuable. 4. I stopped waiting for someday. For many years, I lived with a word that sounded harmless but quietly stole more opportunities from me than I realized. That word was someday. Someday I would take that trip. Someday I would learn to paint. Someday I would visit old friends. Someday I would focus on myself. The problem was that someday never seemed to arrive. There was always a reason to wait, a bill to pay, a family responsibility, a project that needed attention. Even after retirement, I found new excuses. I told myself I would start when the weather was better, when I had more energy, or when life felt less complicated. Then one day, a close friend of mine received unexpected health news. Thankfully, she recovered, but the experience changed both of us. As we sat together talking, she said something I have never forgotten. We spend so much time assuming we have more time. Those words stayed with me. I realized I had been treating my dreams like they were safely stored away for later, but later is never guaranteed. So I made a promise to myself. I would stop waiting. I signed up for a class I had wanted to take for years. I planned a small trip that I had been postponing. I reached out to people I missed instead of assuming there would always be another chance. Were those changes dramatic? Not really, but they made life feel bigger, richer, and more alive. After 60, I learned that the perfect moment rarely appears. Most of the things that bring us joy begin with a simple decision to start before we feel completely ready. The truth is, life is happening now. Not next year, not when everything is perfect. Now. And once I stopped waiting for someday, I finally started living today. 5. I stopped neglecting my health. If there is one thing I wish I had taken more seriously earlier in life, it would be my health. Like many people, I spent decades putting other priorities first. There was always work to finish, family to care for, errands to run, and responsibilities that seemed more urgent than taking care of myself. I told myself I would focus on my health later. But after 60, I began to notice small changes. I felt more tired than I used to. My joints were stiffer in the morning. Recovering from a poor night's sleep took longer. Little aches and pains that I once ignored started demanding my attention. At first, I resisted. I convinced myself it was simply part of getting older. Then I realized something important. Growing older is inevitable. Growing weaker is not always inevitable. That realization changed the way I treated my body. I didn't join an intense fitness program or try to become the healthiest person in the world overnight. Instead, I focused on simple habits I could actually maintain. I started walking every day, even if it was only for 20 minutes. I drank more water. I added more fruits, vegetables, and protein to my meals. I stretched in the mornings instead of rushing straight into the day. Most importantly, I stopped postponing doctor appointments and preventive care. The changes were small, but the results were remarkable. Within a few months, I had more energy. I slept better. I felt stronger and more confident doing everyday activities. Even my mood improved. After 60, I learned that health is not about looking younger. It is about protecting your independence, your mobility, and your ability to enjoy life. Money can buy comfort. Success can buy convenience. But neither can replace good health. The greatest gift you can give your future self is taking care of your body today. And no matter your age, it is never too late to start. 6. I stopped caring so much about what other people think. For much of my life, I worried far too much about what other people thought of me. I wanted to be a good daughter, a good wife, a good mother, a good friend. I wanted people to approve of my choices. I wanted to avoid disappointing anyone. The problem was that somewhere along the way, I stopped asking myself what I wanted. After 60, I began to realize how exhausting that had become. I remember wanting to take a painting class for years. Every time I thought about it, a voice in my head would say, "What if you're not good enough?" Or, "What will people think of a woman your age trying something new?" One day, I finally got tired of listening to that voice. So I signed up. Was I the best painter in the class? Not even close. But for the first time in a long time, I was doing something simply because it brought me joy. And that felt wonderful. As I grew older, I learned a surprising truth. Most people are too busy thinking about their own lives to spend much time judging mine. That realization was incredibly freeing. I started wearing what I liked instead of what seemed appropriate. I became more comfortable saying no without feeling guilty. I stopped apologizing for wanting quiet, rest, or time alone. After 60, I discovered that freedom is not just about having fewer responsibilities. It is about letting go of the need for constant approval. Because at the end of life, very few people regret being themselves. But many regret spending years trying to be who everyone else expected them to be. And I no longer wanted to live that way. 7. I stopped filling my mind with negativity. There was a time when I started every morning the same way. I would turn on the news, scroll through headlines, and absorb story after story about problems, conflicts, disasters, and things that could go wrong. At first, I told myself I was simply staying informed. But over time, I noticed something troubling. The more negativity I consumed, the heavier I felt. I became more anxious about the future. I worried about things I couldn't control. I spent precious energy on problems that were happening hundreds or even thousands of miles away, while ignoring the good things right in front of me. One morning, after listening to nearly an hour of discouraging news, I caught myself feeling upset before my day had even begun. That was when I asked myself an important question. Is this helping me live a better life? The answer was no. So I made a change. I didn't stop paying attention to the world completely. I still wanted to know what was happening. But I stopped allowing negativity to dominate my thoughts every day. Instead, I began filling my mind with things that lifted my spirit. I spent more time reading inspiring books. I listened to uplifting podcasts. I called friends who made me laugh. I took walks in nature and paid attention to the beauty around me instead of focusing only on what was wrong with the world. The difference was remarkable. I felt calmer. I slept better. I worried less and appreciated more. After 60, I learned that my attention is one of the most valuable things I own. Where I place it shapes how I feel, how I think, and how I experience life. The world will always contain problems, but it also contains kindness, hope, love, and beauty. And I finally decided those were the things I wanted more of in my life. 8. I stopped avoiding my financial reality. For many years, money was something I thought about only when I had to. Like a lot of people, I went through periods where I avoided looking too closely at my finances. Sometimes it was because I felt overwhelmed. Sometimes it was because I was afraid of what I might find. But after 60, I realized that avoiding financial reality doesn't create peace of mind. It creates uncertainty. One afternoon, I sat down with a notebook, my bank statements, and a cup of coffee. I reviewed my income, expenses, savings, and future needs. To be honest, I had been putting this off for much longer than I should have. What surprised me was that the process wasn't nearly as frightening as I had imagined. In fact, the more clearly I understood my situation, the calmer I felt. I finally knew where I stood. I knew what I could afford, what I needed to plan for, and where I could make adjustments if necessary. At the same time, I learned another important lesson. There is a difference between being financially responsible and being financially obsessed. Some people spend so much time worrying about every dollar that they forget to enjoy their lives. I didn't want to fall into that trap either, so I found a balance. I created a simple plan, reviewed it regularly, and then allowed myself to move on with my day. After 60, I learned that money should be a tool, not a source of constant fear. A good financial plan doesn't just protect your future, it gives you confidence in the present. And once I stopped avoiding my financial reality, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. 9. I stopped living like I had forever. The final thing I stopped doing after 60 was perhaps the most important of all. I stopped living as if I had unlimited time. For most of my life, I assumed there would always be another year, another opportunity, another chance to do the things I wanted to do. I postponed conversations. I delayed dreams. I convinced myself that important things could wait until later. Then, as the years passed, I began losing people I cared about. Friends I had laughed with for decades. Family members I thought would always be there. Each loss reminded me of a simple truth that many of us try not to think about. Life is precious because it is limited. That realization was not depressing. In fact, it was liberating. For the first time, I truly understood the value of today. I started calling people instead of telling myself I would do it next week. I expressed gratitude more often. I stopped holding on to old grudges that only weighed me down. I became quicker to forgive and slower to postpone the things that mattered. I also began asking myself a powerful question. If this year were one of the most important years of my life, how would I choose to spend it? The answer changed many of my priorities. I spent less time worrying and more time appreciating. Less time waiting and more time acting. Less time focusing on what was missing and more time enjoying what was already here. After 60, I learned that none of us knows exactly how much time we have left. But that uncertainty is not something to fear. It is something to honor. Because every morning we wake up is a gift. Every conversation, every laugh, every sunset, every opportunity to love and be loved is part of a life that will never come this way again. And once I stopped living like I had forever, I finally learned how to truly live. Conclusion. Everything changed when I let go. Looking back now, I can honestly say that the biggest transformation in my life after 60 did not come from gaining something new. It came from letting things go. I stopped saving out of fear and started enjoying the life I had worked so hard to build. I stopped spending on things that didn't matter and focused on experiences that filled my heart. I stopped trading precious time for obligations that no longer served me. I stopped waiting for someday and began living today. I also learned to take better care of my health, to worry less about other people's opinions, and to protect my mind from constant negativity. I faced my finances with honesty instead of fear. And most importantly, I stopped acting as though I had forever. What happened as a result? I became lighter, not younger, not richer, not perfect, just lighter. I found more peace in ordinary days, more gratitude in simple moments, more joy in the people, places, and experiences that truly mattered. If there is one message I hope you take from my story, it is this. The years after 60 are not about holding on tighter. They are about choosing wisely, letting go of what weighs you down and making room for what brings meaning to your life. Now I'd love to hear from you. Which of these 9 things are you ready to let go of? Share your answer in the comments below. And if this message spoke to your heart, please subscribe to the channel and join our community. Together, we can continue creating a life filled with purpose, freedom, and joy no matter our age.